We have a really amazing panel here, and what we're going to be hearing about is hearing from Marguerite Koster talking about how consumers specifically can get involved in guideline development.
Thank you, Kate, and I'm very happy to be here. As she said, I'm Marguerite Koster, and I work with Kaiser Permanente in Southern California, and I run their clinical practice guidelines and technology assessment program there. I've also been very active with the Guidelines International Network and its North American branch that's called GIN North America. And I'm here today to talk to you all about some of the activities, give a brief description about what GIN is and GIN North America, and some of the activities that they're involved in and what you can get involved in as well, because we really invite the participation of consumers and patients in the work that we're doing in terms of guideline development. So the first question is, what is GIN? I know some of you are probably aware of GIN, others maybe not as much, but it's really a global network that was founded about 10 years ago, and it comprises about 90 plus organizational members and about 80 individual members from 43 countries and 5 continents. It's really truly a global organization. And it provides a network and partnerships for guideline organizations and implementers, consumers, end users, researchers, students, and other stakeholders, essentially anyone who's involved in any aspect of guideline development. We want to bring them to the table to talk about how we can all work together. It really assists members in reducing duplication of effort. For those of you who have gone to the National Guideline Clearinghouse and looked for hypertension guidelines and found 400 of them, I think that's indicative of the fact that there are a lot of different guidelines developed by different organizations, and boy, if we could just pool our resources and get some agreement on these guidelines, wouldn't that be great? Well, that's really one of the things that GIN is trying to do, is to provide this network of people so that we can get together and really form partnerships and be more efficient with our resources, get a lot of engagement from different types of organizations, whether it's medical specialty societies, healthcare delivery organizations, consumers, various groups involved in guidelines, and really try to avoid the duplication of all of these efforts and really have some efficiency around clinical practice guideline development. GIN also promotes best practice through the development of opportunities for learning, and I'll be talking a little bit more about those. And then it establishes high quality standards for guideline development, adaptation, dissemination, and implementation. And it has a paper that outlines its standards as well. First of all, GIN has a website that everyone is welcome to go to, and I encourage you to do so. GIN, first and foremost, is a member organization. So there are organizational members and there are individual members. And lots of the larger organizations that can afford to have, a number of people involved are at the organization level, but it doesn't preclude people from joining at the individual level, which is a little more affordable, especially if you're in a small organization and you want to be involved in activities. That being said, there are a lot of free things that are available on the GIN website, so I encourage you, to go and take a look at it. You can see there's a section about GIN, activities, they have a library, they publicize their events, they have a newsletter that you can get on the mailing list for, and you can contact them if there are any questions. So essentially, this is the hub for the information about the Guidelines International Network, all of its activities, including GIN North America. And consumer involvement is a big thing within Guidelines International Network. In fact, our own Carol Sakala, who's here, she was involved in the development of what they have is a consumer involvement kit. The reason they developed that is that a lot of organizations really didn't know how to involve consumers in their guideline development, and there was a lot of education that was needed around this. And so they formed a group called GIN Public, and one of the first things that they decided to do was really take on this issue of involving consumers in clinical practice guideline development. And the first part of that was really educating guideline developers on how to do this. And so they have a patient and public involvement working group, the PPI working group, and they really connect researchers, health professionals, and consumers interested in promoting ways to inform and involve the public in clinical guideline activity around the world. A lot more, there's quite a bit of consumer involvement in, countries like the UK and Canada, and there are countries that are much more advanced than what's been going on in the United States. And so we're really trying to learn from those countries that have a lot of experience in doing and having consumers involved in their activities, and bring that into the United States and really get that going within our North American community. The Gin Public has its own page on the website. It posts information about projects in various countries, including the U.S. They have handbooks on public involvement, all kinds of literature references, things like that. They use a wiki website to exchange information about involving patients in the public in guideline development. So I encourage you all to go to that. And then they host a Gin Public discussion group for people to share ideas and views. To access this information, you do not need to be a member of the organization. So it's available to anyone who goes to the Gin website, and I encourage you to do that. Here's just an example of their website and their URL address, and you can see, it describes Gin Public, what their activities are. They have an ongoing feed for news, like the Gin Public. They had a new toolkit on patient and public involvement and guidelines. Very, very comprehensive. This toolkit that they have, it really assembles international experiences and best practice examples of successful patient involvement in guideline development. And it provides support for organizations that are really at the beginning stages of involving consumers in their guidelines. It was developed by the PPI work group, including Carol. And chapters include things like how to conduct public and target, consultation, how to recruit and support patient and public members. These all seem, very basic to us, but there are lots of organizations that have never been involved or had consumers involved in their work, and so something that really provides the basics has been necessary. How the chair of a guideline group can facilitate patient involvement, how to develop patient versions of guidelines, involving patients in the public in guideline dissemination, and how guidelines can support patient involvement in the clinic. So it really looks at a number of different levels of patient involvement. Gin activities and resources, they have conferences, workshops, webinars, and publications. And coming up in San Francisco, as has been mentioned, is their 10th annual conference. And I was so pleased to hear that we have some consumers that are coming to this conference, and that was able to be funded. Because what I have found is that consumer involvement in the Gin conferences and Gin North American activities has really been critical to moving the whole field of clinical practice guideline development forward. And then Gin has a newsletter. You can subscribe to that and have it come directly, to your email box. And what that does, it'll keep you apprised of different activities that are going on within the organization. And there usually is, something that involves consumers, how consumers have been involved, mentions different projects, things like that. So I encourage you to subscribe to that. So then we move on to, what is Gin North America? Well, about a few years ago, when the Institute of Medicine started to develop its standards for clinical practice guidelines and systematic reviews, what happened is that a lot of guideline developers had a real heads up about how they were developing their guidelines and the evidence basis for those guidelines. A lot of the guidelines that are developed by specialty organizations, things like that, previously have been consensus statements, getting physicians together and really using their expert opinion to develop guidelines with maybe, some cursory reviews of the evidence. That's developed over the years, and especially with the institution of the IOM standards, a lot of guideline organizations realize that in order to have their guidelines posted as of 2014, I think it's mid-2014, on the National Guideline Clearinghouse, they have to be evidence-based. And what that means is conducting a systematic review for every clinical question that you're asking. That is really an important step in the United States. That's been happening in other parts of the world, but I have to say in the United States it's lagged behind. So we are really trying to push education around what those standards are, how to develop systematic reviews to support your guidelines, and how to involve patients in that process. So the actual steering group was launched in April and May of 2011, and of course Rebecca Burkholder has been involved in that. And it really organizes and promotes collaboration, education, and regional events. It promotes adoption of evidence-based guideline standards. We've had some webinars on the IOM standards. And we really, as with the international organization, we want to get people to collaborate on guideline development. It's really important that we all stop wasting resources and having conflicting guidelines and work together, to develop clinical practice guidelines that can be used by lots of organizations and developed efficiently. It promotes relationships between GIN and the North American guideline community, and it also interacts with various GIN groups such as GIN Public. So here were the IOM standards, and this really was a good step forward in terms of involving, consumers in guideline development. It was also a big heads up for guideline developers in the US community. And the standard was really around guideline development group composition. And one of the standards was patient and public involvement should be facilitated by including, at least at the time of clinical question formulation and draft CPG review, a current or former patient and a patient advocate or patient consumer organization representative in the guideline development group. That is a huge step forward. And so one of the things that we're trying to do in GIN North America is really to get consumers involved in the guidelines that are being developed by organizations in the United States. And encouraging consumer involvement, there are a number of things. You can be involved on the level of patient and public versions of guidelines, decision aids, and information material. We promote consultation on the scope of the draft CPG, literature review, being involved in focus groups for guidelines, and then also actual participation on the guideline development groups. These are some of the areas, especially related to clinical practice guideline development, that are important for consumer involvement. And consumer contributions to guideline development, I don't need to mention these too much, but common sense, perspective, skepticism about some of the things that are being proposed, respect for harms, patient education, shared decisions. All of these types of things are really coming from the patient perspective or the consumer perspective. And oftentimes on guideline teams, I've been involved in probably up to 50 guideline teams at this point in my career, and I can tell you that it is so enriched when we have patient and consumer involvement, because questions get asked and issues are raised that wouldn't have been brought up if it was just a group of physicians and analysts in the room developing those guidelines. So I, for one, am a strong advocate of this. GIN North America also strongly supports Q efforts. I think it was mentioned earlier that Rebecca had mentioned this, that at the conference, the GIN conference in San Francisco, GIN North America is hosting a reception and networking event. And at that event, we decided that, we should be giving back to the community as well. And the team that was working on the reception, along with Kay, we decided that we were going to have an event where 10% of the proceeds from all beverages purchased are going to be donated to Q. And so these are some of the things that we've been wanting to do to make sure that, okay, we're getting a bunch of people together, let's do something good, and let's make it known that there's going to be, more consumer involvement in our activities. So this is the first time we've done it. GIN North America is very new, and we're moving forward, but we thought this is a great opportunity to raise awareness among guideline developers about Q and its activities, and to also get some money out of people. I say we're encouraging people to drink, but it doesn't necessarily have to be alcoholic beverages, so it's all beverages. Oh yes, in fact, we'll have copies of the posters. So we decided to do a takeoff on the Summer of Love in San Francisco, and so we had some artwork done around that. We've got kind of a 60s thing going for the conference. And anyway, GIN North America, how do you get involved? Number one, please join the GIN North America mailing list. We're an organization, as I say, I'll be taking over as the chair next year. And I'll say, I work for an organization where I have no authority and no funding. I mean, essentially, this is all a volunteer organization of people who have been involved in guideline development. But one of the things that we try to do is just get people on a mailing list and send out information. And we really use that list to inform people about attending monthly webinars. GIN North America has a monthly webinar series that is open to anyone in the North American guideline community. I mean, sometimes we have people calling in from Australia and the UK, and they're welcome as well. But what we've been trying to do is find out ways to more actively involve consumers and consumer organizations in our webinars. And we had one that was on how to involve patients in public and guideline development, and that was really to get the word out there about the GIN Public Toolkit to different organizations that wanted to involve consumers. And the webinars are available for online viewing, and here's the URL. So please go and take a look at the webinars, get on the mailing list. The first bullet here, send an email to Yurato Abrahamian at kp.org. She works with me. Kaiser Permanente is supporting the webinar and providing the platform for it to happen, and we also send out the invitations and get the word out. That 5 minutes, okay. Participate in GIN and GIN North America regional events. The eGAPS conference was amazing. We had so much consumer involvement there, and everyone loved it, and I've been hearing lots about it since. And we have a regional event that will probably be in 2014-15. I encourage you to think about being the consumer representative on the GIN North America steering group. Talk to Rebecca about that, and then join the GIN Public Discussion Forum. Some of the things I was thinking about, potential areas for partnerships and joint efforts between GIN and GIN North America, is I think we could develop a webinar that features a case study of a Q member who was involved in guideline activities. Now, this could be Q members, but what I'd like to see is having some Q members and organizations that were involved working with the Q members in guideline development. And, that partnership, I think, is important to communicate and talk about successful partnerships where consumers were involved. In the long term, I could see something like building on Q's efforts to match consumers with North American guideline developers. I know that's something that Q at the U.S. Cochrane Center has done, but I think GIN North America could really help promote that. And then foster Q participation in GIN North America regional conferences and events, both as speakers and attendees. So we'll keep you in mind with that. Another area is patient and family-centered initiatives. Get involved with those. That is a huge area that's being developed now with ARC and a number of other organizations. That's involving patients and consumers at the very basic level on advisory councils and various groups. Here's the ARC site to get more information on that. All kinds of organizations, including Kaiser Permanente and the Institute for Clinical Systems Improvement, and a host of hospitals are putting together focus groups and survey panels and advisory councils and quality and safety committees, and they are actively looking for consumer involvement. Kaiser has a regional member advisory council, and it also has something called Member Voice. We have about, I think, 15,000 of our members who are involved and available for surveys. We use them constantly to determine what consumer needs are in initiatives that we'll be developing. They're looking for different types of people, but for the most part, here are the kinds of characteristics. And one of the things I'd like to add to this list of things they're looking for, let's add evidence-based to the list. Let's get consumers and patients involved in evidence-based medicine, encouraging physicians to use evidence-based medicine, and encouraging these organizations to make all of their initiatives evidence-based. That is really lacking right now. So I don't know if I'm taking questions right away, or do you want to wait? Okay. Thanks.